Hello, and welcome back to another episode in Wellbeing Moments, the space where we explore the emotional psychology behind our behaviours, or to put it in another way, the what we do and the why. And ask ourselves, how can we change if we need to? I'm Andy, a psychotherapist with Wellbeing with Therapy, and today's topic is one we all use in varying degrees, mostly perhaps without knowing, and it's called avoidance strategy. As humans, we are often wired to move forward toward pleasure and avoid pain. We do this in many ways, and in today's podcast, we're going to look at one area that impacts our behaviours, and we're going to discuss the 5 types of avoidance. You may want to avoid people or places or things because you have a feeling or a sense, also known as mind reading. Remember this, one of the unhelpful thinking habits talked about in an earlier podcast. It's worrying about how the situation may turn out, and the worrying is not often positive. Avoidance is the way we attempt to minimize and avert any perceived emotional threat, danger, or anxiety. An example of this is, if I was bit by a dog, I may be afraid to approach dogs. But if it's cognitive, e.g. I have no physical experience, but I can think how painful it might be to be bit, so I'll also avoid dogs, even though I have never been bitten. I will talk through more of the examples as we work our way through this podcast. If certain behaviours are hindering your personal growth, you may find it helpful to determine what your avoidance strategy is and to take action to overcome them. Awareness, as we've discussed in all these episodes for Wellbeing Moments, is the start to allow you to change things for the better. So today, we are going to explore the 5 major types of avoidance. And this is situational, cognitive, e.g. in the mind, protective, somatic, which is more bodily, and substitution. I will give some examples and how the strategies can impact you and what you perhaps can do to manage them in more healthier ways. So, take a deep breath, put your listening ears on, and we'll make a start. So the first avoidance is situational avoidance. This is the most common type of avoidance. Situational avoidance is where we avoid places, people, or even events that we associate with distress or discomfort. As an example, let's say you had a panic attack in a crowded shopping centre. This causes you to avoid shopping centres altogether in the future. Or maybe public speaking makes you feel exposed, so you turn down opportunities that require giving presentations, or perhaps even seeking promotions. Look at crowded lifts where you will wait for one until you feel comfortable. You may even avoid eye contact with new people. This is actually known as short-term relief, but the long-term cost. In other words, this strategy gives us immediate relief, we're avoiding something, but it actually shrinks our world. The more we avoid, the smaller our comfort zone becomes. Our fears grow in the absence of exposure. So, what can you learn to do instead? Well, we start small, baby steps. Use gradual exposure to rebuild your confidence. You might begin by spending just 5 minutes in a situation you've been avoiding, each time saying to yourself, I will be okay. I will be okay. Then increase it over time. You can use calming strategies as we have covered before, like breathing in and out through your nose only, or perhaps you have other grounding techniques yourself. It is important to validate what you are trying, telling yourself, I am trying my best. And remember to breathe too. So let's look at the next one. This is cognitive avoidance. This form of avoidance happens internally in our minds. Actively turning your mind away from distressing thoughts or memories or emotions by distracting ourselves or rationalizing things away. And some examples to help explain what I mean. Constantly distracting yourself with work or social media to avoid perhaps thinking about a breakup. Telling yourself it's not a big deal when somebody or something deeply hurt you. It could, in some cases, take the form of chronic worrying or obsessive thoughts. Remember, catastrophizing in unhelpful thinking habits are the what-if questions, and you go over and over things with no answers. Scrolling social media for hours instead of reflecting on perhaps why you're feeling what you're feeling, like feeling low. Telling yourself it wasn't that bad to avoid thinking about a painful childhood experience. Over-intellectualizing your feelings, talking about sadness if it was happening to somebody else rather than allowing yourself to feel it, or perhaps learning how to allow yourself to feel sadness. And how does this impact us? Cognitive avoidance prevents emotional processing. This means we do not explore our feelings, nor perhaps talk about them with somebody we can trust. By doing this, it blocks healing and reinforces the belief that you can't handle strong feelings. It also disconnects you from your own emotional truth and means you can't emotionally regulate and go into the hyper-arousal state, being unsettled or agitated, etc. What could help? You could practice journaling, where you write what happened, which is the trigger, what you felt, and how did you respond. It's good to reflect later. This is the same as capturing something in an emotional log. It can be very powerful here. When a thought or a memory comes up, sit with it for a moment. Ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me? Be curious, but not critical is key. Writing down what the thought is, what emotion you feel, and any unhelpful thinking habits, this encourages, this helps you when you reflect later to understand what's going on. The third avoidance is called protective avoidance. This avoidance is all about emotional defense. This is when we avoid feeling vulnerable or we avoid confrontation so that we can protect ourselves from feeling rejection, feeling failure, or even the more powerful one, shame. An example here is compulsive cleaning. Yes, those who may clean all the cupboards or excessive hoovering. This is actually about avoiding what may be making you anxious. Avoiding conflict in relationships by sometimes saying yes when you really mean no. Or not telling a friend if they have upset you. This helps to avoid a potential argument or rejection. Or we may follow perfectionism and over-preparation for a class or getting ready for work. This can mean delaying facing what will happen there. Another is keeping people at a distance so they can't hurt you. This could even be not ringing them or visiting them. Even keeping lucky charms or talismans are included here. And how does this impact us emotionally? Over time, protective avoidance erodes relationships and your sense of self. You may appear strong or independent, but inside you can feel unseen and even lonely. Let's also reinforce EMS schemas like I'm unlovable or if I open up I'll be hurt. If you remember, these early maladaptive schemas are discussed more in depth in the other earlier podcast. So what can we do? We try to build emotional safety through small acts of vulnerability. To do this, try starting by expressing your opinion in a low-risk situation. Or perhaps try telling somebody you know and like how you are really doing. Therapy can also be a safe place to practice this, and of course, learn about the tools to support you. The fourth avoidance is somatic avoidance. This is about how we may react bodily. Somatic avoidance is when we disconnect from or try and avoid sensations in the body, things like tension, even pain, or emotions that show up physically, such as a rapid racing heart rate, tingling sensations in the extremities like feet or hands. All these are known as some form of somatic experience. Many people associate these feelings with panic, even panic attacks, or also fear, being afraid, or perhaps medical conditions can also be scary. Looking at some examples here, using excuses to avoid exercise because it reminds you of discomfort, not breathing deeply because it intensifies emotional sensations, distracting yourself or focusing elsewhere whenever anxiety rises in the chest or the gut. People who avoid these type of somatic responses often avoid activities or situations that would trigger them, such as perhaps a roller coaster, the thrill rides, or being in uncertain situations. And one of those can be even falling in love. Or attending or planning exciting events, such as weddings, and it also includes sexual arousal. Okay, so why do we do it? The body holds emotional experiences. If you felt anger or sadness, which is triggered by receiving a punishment or any fear in childhood, your body will have learned to turn off these signals. So what does that mean to you? You can be cut off from your emotional compass. This can even lead to psychosomatic symptoms such as chronic fatigue, migraines, or even digestive issues. Quite often many clients complain about their tummies. So if you suffer with this, what can you do? Learn to practice gentle reconnection to your body. To do this, you could try body exercises like stretching or mindful movements such as yoga, practicing breath work. And you could explore having somatic therapy. All these are great tools for learning to feel safe again. And finally, the fifth avoidance is substitution. Substance avoidance can take shape either internally or externally. Internally, this could be seen as replacing certain feelings like sadness or grief with something that feels more acceptable to you, like anger. Externally, this could look like relying on something we call a crutch. The crutch would allow us to cope with emotional pain. The crutch could be things like alcohol, food, drugs like cocaine or weed, even sex, or gambling and shoplifting. We can even use work as a crutch, often sometimes called workaholics. This is all about anything else that provides temporary respite from us having to feel uncomfortable emotions. This is the common feature of substance use disorders, also known as addictions, often linked also with the ACEs and EMS, and it also has an impact with the inner child. So, some examples: Instead of facing grief from a relationship that has just ended, you dive into dating or partying. You're avoiding that grief. Rather than dealing with stress, whether work or home life related, you obsess over a hobby or a fitness routine. Again, the crutches can be alcohol, food, sex. These allow us to distract ourselves from feeling any emotional pain. They are looking for the pleasure. If we work long hours to avoid dealing with loneliness or family issues, yes, each of these can be confusing. Substitution methods look actually like they're a coping skill, but in reality, it is the intent matters. Ask yourself, are you using it to emotionally regulate or to run? And what's the negative impact on ourselves? The original issue remains unaddressed, and you may start depending on these substitutions to feel okay, the crutch now. If you notice or realize this is what you're doing, what can you do about this? When you notice yourself reaching for whatever the substitute is, pause and ask, what am I avoiding right now? What do I actually need? You might discover that beneath the craving for distraction is actually a need for rest, or comfort being hugged, or just being with someone, or just be able to connect to others. Avoidance is natural. We all exhibit some avoidant tendencies from time to time. After all, it will have helped many of us survive emotionally when we didn't have any better tools. But when avoidance becomes our default way of being, it can and will limit our lives, potentially reinforces our fears, and it will lead to us being disconnected, feeling isolated from others, and actually sometimes even ourselves. Each of the 5 types of avoidance have roots in our self-protection, but healing begins when we stop running away from our fears and or our emotions and start to gently turn towards our fears. And yes, this will feel and seem scary, but you don't have to dive in head first. Start with a toe in the water. Small steps like trying to delay what you would normally do and think. Even if you continue, it's a start. Important to remind yourself you've survived 100% of your hardest days so far. So ask yourself, how can I make it easier for me to live rather than survive? Also remember, when you realize you are using avoidance strategies, there are benefits of working in therapy. A professional can help you by working with you without judgment, just to be able to examine the root cause of the behaviour, help you learn to express your emotions in a helpful and productive way, develop tools to realise, understand, and then cope with any of your distress. Learn how to self-regulate your emotions during difficult times. So important to self-soothe, but we need to learn how and why. So, to recap, avoidance is part of your hardwiring behaviour as a human being. In some cases, avoidance can become the way of life. Not only can that prevent personal and emotional growth, but also inhibit the satisfaction that comes with overcoming your fears. Avoidance can also take away from your overall quality of life and relationships, even maybe hurting those around you. Think about, in the long term, your quality of life is on hold. The depth, the height, and reach of your very existence is limited. Because you're day after day, week after week, year after year, avoiding feelings that ultimately are unavoidable. If you remember, we have 2,000 emotions, which is rather a lot to avoid. Learning to work with them, facing them, they won't scare you going forward. I would like to thank you for spending time with me today. I hope this episode may have helped you understand yourself a bit more. Please consider sharing it or even leaving a review. Any thoughts or comments around this podcast, or even suggestions for other subject matters you may be interested in, let me know. You can email me at, all one word, wellbeingwiththerapy@gmail.com. So until the next time, remember, be kind to yourself. Compassion is important. Just think you've started doing the work just by listening to this, and that's brave. Take care.